Hello there, and welcome. Go ahead and find a comfortable spot, and just let yourself settle in for the night. You don't have to do anything right now except relax and listen. It's pretty common, when we finally get quiet, for our minds to start replaying the day. It kind of scrolls back through conversations we had, or decisions we made. And it's so easy to get stuck on the things we wish we'd done differently, or the moments we're not so proud of. That little bit of regret or anxiety about our choices is often the exact thing that keeps us from switching off and getting the rest we need. So tonight, we're going to look at a simple tool from an old Greek philosopher named Epicurus. He was really focused on one main thing: how to live a calm life, as free from anxiety as possible. And he had this idea he called the wise calculation of pleasure and pain. It sounds a bit complicated, but it's actually a really simple and kind way to look back on your choices, without any of the harsh judgment we usually place on ourselves. So again, you don't have to remember any of this or even think too hard about it. The goal here is just to relax. So just get comfortable, and let's explore this simple idea together as you get ready for sleep. So, let's start with the most important idea, the one that everything else is built on. It's about the goal. That word, happiness. It can be a lot of pressure, can't it? We see it everywhere, and we're told it's what we should be chasing. We imagine it means big, exciting moments. Laughter, success, adventure, that feeling of being on top of the world. And so, we spend our days trying to collect those moments. We try to be productive, to be fun, to be successful. And then, at the end of the day, we lie in bed and we measure our day against that standard. And if the day was just normal, if it was quiet, or a little difficult, or even just uneventful, we can feel like we failed. We feel like we missed the mark, that we weren't happy enough. That feeling of falling short is a source of so much stress. But Epicurus had a completely different idea. He thought the ultimate goal wasn't what we think of as happiness at all. It was something much quieter. The word he used translates to something like tranquility or calm. He believed that our natural state, when nothing is bothering us, is actually a very pleasant and peaceful one. He didn't think happiness was something you had to go out and get. It wasn't something you had to achieve or add to your life. He thought it was what was left over when you took away the things that were disturbing your peace. Think of your mind like a glass of water with mud at the bottom. The constant striving and worrying and chasing is like constantly stirring that glass. The water is always cloudy, always murky. You can't see through it. We spend our lives trying to pour some kind of magic happiness liquid into the glass to make it clear, but it just gets mixed in with the mud. Epicurus would say, just stop stirring. Put the spoon down. Let the mud settle on its own. The clearness you're looking for isn't something you add. It was there all along. The peace, the calm, that is the natural state of the water. What this means is that a good day, a successful day, wasn't necessarily one filled with excitement. For Epicurus, a good day could be one that was simply free from anxiety. A day where nothing particularly bad happened. A day where you felt safe, and you weren't in pain, and your mind was relatively quiet. So, as we go through these ideas, let's hold on to this one. The goal is not to fill our lives up. The goal is to protect our own inner quiet. It's to stop stirring the water. Because that peaceful, untroubled feeling is not some far-off prize you have to win. It's your natural state, just waiting for the mud to settle. And a day that ends in this quiet, simple state of rest is a day that has been a great success. So, let's talk about those two big words, pleasure and pain. When we hear them, our minds immediately jump to very specific things. We think of pleasure as something active, something we go out and get. The taste of a really good meal, the feeling of laughing with a friend, the excitement of a trip, or the satisfaction of finishing a big project. It's a spike, a positive feeling that we add to our lives. And we think of pain as something that happens to us. A headache, a stubbed toe, a piece of bad news. It's a negative feeling, a sharp spike downwards that interrupts our normal state. Epicurus looked at these two words very differently. His definitions are a lot simpler, a lot quieter, and maybe a little bit boring. And that's exactly why they are so helpful when it comes to finding peace at the end of the day. Let's start with pain, because it's actually the easier one to understand in his view. For Epicurus, pain wasn't just about physical discomfort. He was much more interested in the mental and emotional side of it. He considered any kind of disturbance to your peace of mind to be a form of pain. Think about the feeling of anxiety. That knot in your stomach when you're worried about a presentation you have to give tomorrow. That is a kind of pain. It's a disturbance. Think about the feeling of wanting something you can't have. That constant, low-level frustration and desire for a new car, or a different job, or for someone's approval. That nagging feeling of not enough is also a form of pain. It stirs up your inner quiet. Even just being bored and restless is a kind of pain. It's a state of wanting to be somewhere else, doing something else. So, for Epicurus, pain is any state of wanting, worrying, fearing, or striving. It's the mental noise. It's the mud being stirred up in that glass of water. Now, here is the most important part. If that's what pain is, then what is pleasure? Pleasure, in his view, wasn't something you had to go out and find. Pleasure was simply the absence of pain. It was the state of not wanting, not worrying, not being in distress. It was the natural, peaceful state that's left over when you remove all the disturbances. The best way to understand this is to think about a headache. When you have a bad headache, the pain is all-consuming. And then you take a pill, and you wait. And then you get to that wonderful moment when you suddenly realize it's gone. The pain is gone. In that moment, what do you feel? It's not a wild, exciting happiness. It's a deep, satisfying feeling of relief. A feeling of simple, wonderful normalness. That feeling, that quiet feeling of, the pain is gone. That is what Epicurus called the highest form of pleasure. It's the pleasure of quenching a thirst. The best feeling isn't the fancy drink itself, but the simple state of no longer being thirsty. It's the pleasure of putting on a warm coat when you're cold. The true pleasure is the state of no longer being cold. And as you are lying here, right now, think about it. You are warm. You are safe. You are not hungry, and you are not thirsty. Your most basic, natural needs are met. This state, this simple, untroubled moment of rest, this is the highest pleasure. It's not something you have to strive for. It's something you are already in. You've already won. The only thing left to do is to stop your mind from creating new disturbances and to just enjoy the quiet, simple pleasure of being at peace. So, we've established that the goal is a calm, untroubled mind, and that the highest pleasure is simply the absence of pain and anxiety. This leads us to the heart of Epicurus's practical advice, his wise calculation. And the first half of this calculation is a little counterintuitive. It's the idea that sometimes the wisest thing we can do is to choose a small, temporary discomfort because we know it will lead to a much greater and longer-lasting peace later on. Now, let's be honest. Our default setting is to avoid discomfort. If something feels like a chore, or it feels difficult, or even just a little bit boring, our natural instinct is to put it off. We're wired to seek what feels good in the immediate moment. We want to avoid all pain all the time. But Epicurus would say that a truly wise and calm person understands that not all pains are created equal. Some pains are just pains. They lead nowhere. But other pains are investments. They are good pains. They are the small, upfront costs for a much larger payoff of tranquility down the road. Let's think about this in a really simple, everyday way. Picture the state of your kitchen after you've made dinner. There are dishes in the sink, crumbs on the counter, and you're tired. The most pleasurable thing in that immediate moment would be to just leave it all and go sit on the sofa. And we've all done that. But there's a cost. Because when you wake up in the morning and the first thing you see is yesterday's mess, you feel a small, internal sigh, a little wave of stress, a feeling of being behind before the day has even started. The wise calculation here, the good pain, is choosing to spend 10 minutes cleaning up, even when you don't feel like it. In that moment, it feels like a chore. It's a small, temporary discomfort. But you are trading that 10 minutes of discomfort for the huge reward of hours and hours of future peace. The great pleasure of waking up to a calm, clean space. The absence of that morning stress. You are, in a very real way, taking care of your future self. You are making a deposit in your bank of tranquility. This applies to so many things. Think about having a difficult but necessary conversation with someone. The pain is the anxiety you feel before you pick up the phone, or the discomfort of saying something that might be a little awkward. It's so much easier in the moment to just avoid it. But the cost of avoidance is that the problem lingers in the back of your mind. It might keep you up at night as you rehearse the conversation in your head. The good pain of just getting it over with, even if it's not perfect, leads to the immense pleasure of relief. The pleasure of no longer having to carry that mental burden around. It's done. The loop is closed. So as you lie here now, you can look back on your day and maybe spot some of these moments. Not with judgment, but with a quiet sense of recognition. Maybe there was a moment today where you chose a good pain. You did the chore, you sent the email, you went for a walk when you wanted to stay on the couch. And in seeing that, you can give yourself a little credit. Because what you were really doing in those moments was practicing this ancient wisdom. You were acting as a good caretaker for your own mind. You were choosing a small, fleeting discomfort for the much more valuable prize of a greater, more lasting peace. And that is a skill that is worth more than anything. So, we've looked at good pains, those small, wise investments of discomfort that pay us back with peace. Now, let's gently turn our attention to the other side of the ledger. This is the part of the calculation that is often a little harder to look at, because it's where we tend to make most of our mistakes. It's the idea of bad pleasures. And again, when Epicurus used a word like bad, he wasn't talking about morality. There is no judgment here. A bad pleasure is not something you should feel guilty about. It is simply a choice that, from the perspective of a calm mind, is a very poor deal. It's a miscalculation. A bad pleasure is any action that offers a small, fleeting moment of enjoyment right now, but comes with a hidden, much larger cost of pain, stress, or anxiety later on. It's like buying a cheap toy that you know is going to break in 5 minutes, and then cause you an hour of frustration. In the moment, it seems appealing, but the math just doesn't work out in your favor. Our world is absolutely full of these kinds of pleasures, and they are very, very tempting. Think about the phone in your bedroom. It's late. You know you should go to sleep, but the lure of one more video or one more scroll through a social media feed is so strong. The immediate pleasure is obvious. It's a little bit of distraction, a hit of new information, a way to numb the mind for a moment. It feels good. It feels easy. But what is the hidden cost? The cost is often paid right here, in this bed. The bright light from the screen tells your brain it's still daytime, making it harder for your natural sleepiness to arrive. The content you see, whether it's the news, or an argument online, or just the curated, perfect-looking lives of other people, can stir up feelings of anxiety, anger, or comparison. You are trading a few minutes of mindless distraction for what could be an hour of a restless, overstimulated mind. The small, immediate pleasure leads to a much greater, longer-lasting pain. It's a bad calculation. This applies to so many things. It's the pleasure of saying yes to a social event you know you don't have the energy for, just to avoid the momentary discomfort of saying no. The cost is the exhaustion you feel the next day. It's the pleasure of eating a heavy snack right before bed that feels comforting in the moment, but the cost is a night of restless sleep. It's the pleasure of putting off an important task to watch another episode of a show. The cost is the increased stress you feel tomorrow when the deadline is even closer, and that nagging voice of procrastination that follows you into your dreams. So, as you rest here, just let your mind gently scan back over the day. Not with a critical eye, not to find fault, but just as a quiet observer. See if you can spot a moment where you chose one of these costly pleasures. See it not as a failure, but simply as a miscalculation. A moment where the short-term reward seemed bigger than the long-term cost. There is no need to feel bad about this. We all do it. We are all wired to seek what feels good in the moment. But the beginning of wisdom, as Epicurus would say, is simply to see the calculation clearly, to recognize the pattern. And in that quiet recognition, without any judgment at all, you are already training your mind to become a little wiser. You are learning, even now as you rest, how to be a better and kinder caretaker of your own future peace. So, we've spent the last few minutes looking at this idea of a calm calculus. We've explored good pains that lead to peace and bad pleasures that lead to more stress. And if you're anything like me, the moment you start to identify those bad pleasures, those miscalculations from your day, a familiar voice probably pops up. It's that inner judge we talked about, the one we gave the night off. He tends to sneak back in, and he sees that you chose the short-term pleasure, and he immediately starts his case. He says things like, "See, you messed up again. You're lazy. You have no self-control. You should have known better." This voice, with its criticism and its judgment, is the number one source of the anxiety that keeps us awake. The judgment itself becomes a new and much larger pain. It stirs up far more mud in the water than the original choice ever did. This is where Epicurus would introduce the most important skill of all. The key to making this whole philosophy work is not to become perfect at making calculations. The key is to change the way you review them. It's the practice of stepping back from that inner judge and instead becoming a gentle, neutral observer. Think of it like this. The judge is on the field, in the middle of the game, shouting at the players, getting angry, getting emotional. But the observer is sitting high up in the stands. They're not on a team. They're not emotionally invested in who wins or loses. They are simply watching the game unfold. They see the patterns. They see a player make a brilliant move, and they just note it. "Ah, that was a good play." They see a player make a mistake, and they note that too, with the same calm neutrality. That move didn't work out so well. I wonder why they did that." This is the mindset we can bring to our own lives. It is the ability to look at our own choices without the heavy cloak of shame or criticism. It is a quiet, kind, and curious way of paying attention. This gentle observer in your mind doesn't use words like good or bad, right or wrong. It just notices cause and effect. So, let's try it, just for a moment. Think back to one of those miscalculations from your day. A moment you chose a short-term pleasure that had a hidden cost. Maybe you stayed on the couch instead of doing that chore. The judge in your mind might say, "You're so lazy. Now you have to deal with that tomorrow." Feel the little sting of that thought. That's the pain of judgment. Now, let's invite the gentle observer to take a look at that same moment. The observer would simply say, "I noticed that I was feeling very tired at that time. And I noticed that the desire for rest was stronger than the desire for a tidy room. And now, I noticed that a small part of my mind is still thinking about that chore. Interesting. Can you feel the difference? It's huge. There's no sting. There's no shame. It's just information. The observer's report is calm, clear, and judgment-free. It's just data. And the wonderful thing about data is that you can learn from it. You can't learn from shame. Shame just makes you want to hide. But calm observation is what allows for wisdom. This is a practice. It's not something we master overnight. But for tonight, as you lie here, you can just gently practice being that observer. When a thought about your day pops into your head, just try to look at it with this quiet, kind curiosity. You are not your choices. You are the one who gets to observe those choices. And from that high, peaceful seat in the stands, you can see things so much more clearly. And from that place of clarity, and not from a place of judgment, a deep and lasting calm can finally begin to grow. So, let's assume you've managed to find that quiet seat high up in the stands. You've asked the inner judge to take a break, and you're now looking at your day with the kind, curious eyes of the gentle observer. This is where the real magic happens. Because the point of observing your choices is not to create a long list of your flaws. The point is to find the wisdom that is quietly waiting for you inside every single one of them. Epicurus believed that life itself is the best teacher, and that every day offers us a new set of lessons on how to live more peacefully. He would argue that a miscalculation, a moment you chose a bad pleasure or avoided a good pain, is not a failure. It is simply a piece of data. It is a quiet message from you, to you, about what you truly need. And if we can learn to read these messages without judgment, they become our most valuable guides to a calmer life. So let's try it. Let's take that gentle, observant mindset for a walk through your day. I want you to gently bring to mind one of those moments we talked about. A moment where you made a bad calculation. Maybe it was procrastinating on a task by watching a video. Or perhaps it was eating a whole pint of ice cream when you were feeling stressed. Or maybe it was just getting drawn into a pointless argument online. Just choose one small moment. Hold it in your mind, not with a feeling of regret, but just as a neutral memory. Now, instead of asking the judge's question, which is always, "What's wrong with you?" let's ask the observer's questions. They are much gentler and much more useful. The first question is, what was I really feeling right before I made that choice? Go back to the moment just before. Were you feeling bored? Were you feeling lonely? Overwhelmed? Anxious? Tired? Try to name the specific feeling. Often, the action we take is just a clumsy attempt to soothe an uncomfortable feeling we haven't acknowledged. The second question is, what was the immediate pleasure I was hoping to get? What was the promise of that action? If you were procrastinating, maybe the promise was a feeling of escape, a little moment of relief from the pressure of your to-do list. If you were eating, maybe the promise was a feeling of comfort, a soft and easy pleasure in a moment of stress. Acknowledge that what you were seeking was not bad. The desire for comfort, for relief, for escape, these are deeply human needs. And now, the third, final question. What was the real, long-term cost? And be honest, but be gentle. The cost wasn't just the unfinished task or the calories. The real cost was likely a feeling. The cost was the nagging, low-level anxiety that followed you afterwards. The cost was the slight drop in your own self-respect. The cost was the way it stirred up the mud in your mind, making the peace you're seeking right now just a little bit harder to find. Do you see the wisdom that's in there? The wisdom isn't you're lazy or you have no willpower. The wisdom is the quiet voice that says, I see. When I feel overwhelmed, my first instinct is to look for a feeling of escape. And I've learned that this particular method of escape, while it feels good for a minute, actually creates more anxiety for me later. That's good to know. That's it. That's the entire lesson. It's not a judgment. It's a discovery. By looking at your day in this way, you transform it from a record of your failures into a personalized instruction manual for your own peace of mind. The day wasn't a test that you passed or failed. It was simply a day of research. And you, the gentle observer, have just gathered some incredibly valuable data. And with that data, you can go into tomorrow just a little bit wiser and a little bit kinder to yourself. So, we've arrived at this very important place. We have managed to quiet the inner judge, and we've spent some time with the gentle observer. We have looked back on our day not as a list of failures, but as a series of lessons. We've seen that our miscalculations, those times we chose a fleeting pleasure that cost us our peace, are not evidence of our flaws, but are actually valuable signposts, gently pointing us toward a wiser way of being. This is a beautiful and calming realization, but it brings us to the most practical and perhaps the most difficult part of this whole process. Once you have understood the lesson from a mistake, what do you do with the memory of the mistake itself? Our minds have a strange and stubborn habit. We tend to cling to the evidence of our errors. It's as if we've eaten a delicious piece of fruit, received all the nourishment and sweetness it had to offer, but then for some reason, we decide to keep the useless peel and carry it around with us. We put it in our pocket. Then we make another mistake, learn another lesson, and stuff that peel in our pocket too. Before we know it, our pockets are full of these old, sticky, useless peels. The memory of the awkward thing you said in that meeting 2 days ago. The lingering frustration with yourself for being impatient in traffic. The regret over the money you spent on something you didn't really need. Each one is a used-up lesson that we refuse to throw away. And at night, when all is quiet, our mind has a tendency to empty out its pockets right onto our bed, and we are left lying in a pile of this old, distracting debris. Why do we do this? It comes from a well-intentioned, but ultimately flawed, part of our mind. The inner judge thinks this is a good strategy. It believes that by constantly showing you the evidence of your past mistakes, it's shaming you into being better. It thinks that if you feel bad enough about what you did, you won't do it again. But this is a strategy built on fear and criticism, and fear and criticism are the opposite of the calm, peaceful state we are looking for. They are a form of pain. They stir the mud in the water. The gentle observer knows a better way. The gentle observer understands that once the wisdom has been fully extracted from an event, the event itself is no longer needed. Its job is done. It has served its entire purpose. To keep carrying it around is not helpful. It's a burden. So, this chapter is about giving yourself explicit permission to clean out your pockets. It is the conscious, quiet act of letting go. Right now, I want you to bring to mind one of those miscalculations from your day, the one we looked at a few moments ago. See it clearly in your mind, but see it from the safety of the observer's seat in the stands. Acknowledge the lesson it taught you, the quiet, simple realization that, when I feel that way, I tend to do this, and I now know it doesn't lead to my long-term peace. Really feel the value of that piece of wisdom. It is a gift. Now, I want you to thank that memory. It sounds a little strange, but just try it in your mind. Say to the memory, "Thank you for the lesson you have taught me." By doing this, you are changing your relationship with it. You are turning it from an enemy that haunts you into a teacher that has helped you. And now that its job is complete, you can let it go. As you lie here, I want you to imagine a slow, gentle stream flowing through your mind. Take the memory of that event, not the wisdom, just the memory of the event itself, and gently place it on a leaf. And then, just let that leaf go. Watch it as it is carried away by the current of the stream. Don't push it. Don't force it. Just release your grip on it. Watch it as it floats gently away, getting smaller and smaller, until it finally drifts around a bend and is peacefully out of sight. It has served its purpose. It is no longer yours to carry. You are not saying it didn't happen. You are not pretending you were perfect. You are simply choosing to be free from the unnecessary weight of a lesson that has already been learned. Because to find the deep rest you deserve, your mind needs to be a clear, open space. And that space can only be created when we are brave enough and kind enough to finally let yesterday go. So, we have looked backward, gently observing the day that has passed, finding its wisdom, and letting go of its weight. Now, let's turn our attention, just for a few moments, to the other direction, the future. Because if regret for the past is one thief of sleep, then anxiety about tomorrow is certainly the other. It's a very common pattern. The moment our head hits the pillow, our mind decides it's the perfect time for a last-minute strategy session for the day ahead. It pulls out a mental whiteboard and starts scribbling down a to-do list. It runs through potential conversations, imagines worst-case scenarios, and tries to solve problems that haven't even happened yet. Your brain is not doing this to be mean. It's doing it because it's trying to feel a sense of control over the uncertainty of the future. It believes that if it can just plan enough and worry enough, it can protect you from being caught off guard. But Epicurus would see a deep flaw in this late-night logic. He would point out that you are trying to do some of your most difficult mental work at the exact moment when you are least equipped to do it. You are tired. Your rational mind is shutting down, and your emotional mind is taking over. Planning from this state doesn't lead to clarity, it leads to catastrophizing. Small worries loom large in the dark. The problems feel bigger, and the solutions feel further away. This kind of planning isn't productive. It's just a form of self-inflicted pain. So, he would offer a much gentler and much wiser alternative. Instead of creating a stressful, detailed plan of what you are going to do tomorrow, you can simply set a quiet intention for how you are going to be. A plan is a list of actions. It's external. An intention is a choice about your inner state. It's internal. And your inner state is the only thing you ever have true control over anyway. So let's try this just for a moment. Gently bring to mind just one thing you know is happening tomorrow. It doesn't have to be the biggest or scariest thing. Just one simple, known event. Maybe it's a meeting you have to attend, or the morning rush to get yourself and your family out the door, or a chore you know you need to tackle. Just hold that one event in your mind. Now, think about the wisdom you gained from observing your day. You learned something about your own patterns. Maybe you learned that when you feel rushed, you tend to get impatient and stressed, or that when you feel bored in a meeting, you get distracted and frustrated. Here is where you connect the wisdom to the intention. The wisdom informs the intention. If you know that the morning rush tends to make you feel stressed, your quiet intention is not a frantic plan like, "I'll wake up 15 minutes earlier and pre-pack everything." That's just more pressure. A much calmer and more powerful intention would be, "Tomorrow, during the morning rush, my intention is to move with a sense of deliberate slowness." Or, "My intention is to meet the feeling of being rushed with one slow, deep breath." If you know you have a boring meeting, your intention isn't, "I will force myself to pay attention." It's, "During that meeting tomorrow, my intention is to practice the art of patient listening." Do you feel the difference? An intention isn't a promise to be perfect. It's not another thing to fail at. It is simply a gentle reminder you are planting in your mind for tomorrow. It's a seed of calm that you can put in the soil tonight. You are giving your mind its single, most important instruction for the day ahead. And by doing this, you satisfy your brain's need for a plan. You've told it, "Don't worry, I have a strategy." The strategy is to be patient. The strategy is to be calm. And with that, the mind can finally relax. The late-night planning session is no longer needed. The whiteboard can be wiped clean. You have given your future self a quiet and a powerful tool, and now you can let go of tomorrow completely, knowing that the most important preparation has already been done. We have spent some time now looking backward, gently observing the day that has passed, finding its wisdom, and letting go of its weight. And we have spent a few moments looking forward, planting a calm and quiet intention for the day to come. We have traveled into the past and into the future with our minds, as our minds so often love to do. But now, we can let both of those go, because this is the moment where the entire philosophy of Epicurus comes home. This is the destination we have been traveling toward all this time. It is the moment where we can finally, fully arrive in the present. Think about the energy of your day. For most of us, it's an energy of forward motion, of striving. Our mind is like a tireless seeker, always looking for something just around the next corner. It's searching for that moment when the to-do list is finally empty. It's searching for that future state of accomplishment or recognition or security. It operates under the constant belief that peace and contentment are a destination that we must work very hard to reach. That one day, after all our striving, we will finally arrive at a place where we are allowed to feel calm. But Epicurus would offer us a radical and beautifully boring alternative. He would gently ask us to stop leaning so far into the future, to stop striving and seeking for just a moment, and to simply take a quiet inventory of where we are, right here, right now. So, let's do that together. Let your attention settle out of your thoughts and gently into your body as it rests here in this bed. Let's just notice a few very simple things we so often take for granted. First, Just notice the feeling of your breath moving in and out. And with it, notice that you are not thirsty. The nagging, painful feeling of thirst is completely absent. You may not be drinking a fancy iced tea, but the fundamental need is met. And in the absence of that pain, there is a quiet, deep, and satisfying state. Epicurus would call this a profound pleasure, the simple pleasure of being sated. Now, notice that you are not hungry. The distracting, uncomfortable feeling of an empty stomach is not here. You are nourished, and in the absence of that want, there is a peaceful, grounded feeling of satisfaction. This, too, he would say, is one of the greatest pleasures available to a human being, the pleasure of having enough. Now, feel the air on your skin. Feel the weight and the texture of the blankets around you. And notice that you are not cold. You are not exposed to the wind or the rain. You are in a safe, warm shelter. The deep, ancient pain of being vulnerable to the elements is completely absent, and in its place is the profound, quiet, and foundational pleasure of safety and comfort. Think of all the energy you spent today, all the running around, all the thinking, all the emails, all the conversations, all the planning, all the worrying. What was it all for, really? If you trace it all back, we do almost everything we do in the hopes of arriving at a feeling of safety, of satisfaction, of peace. And here is the quiet, secret, almost comically simple punchline of this entire philosophy. The state you have been striving for, the prize you have been chasing all day long, the destination you have been working so hard to reach is this. Right here, right now. This simple, uneventful, untroubled moment of lying in a warm, safe bed, not hungry, not thirsty, not in danger. This is it. This is the goal. You are not on your way to it. You are not preparing for it. You have already arrived. There is nothing else you need to get. There is no one else you need to become. There is no future achievement that will make this moment any more complete than it already is. The highest pleasure, the state of deep tranquility, is already here. It has been here all along, waiting patiently underneath all the noise and all the striving of the day. The only reason we don't feel it all the time is because our minds are so busy stirring the mud, as we said before. The constant wanting, the comparing, the worrying, it just obscures the natural clarity and peace that is our baseline state. But right now, you can just let that mud settle. You can rest in the simple, clear, and quiet realization that you have enough. You are enough, and this moment is enough. This is the highest pleasure, and you are already soaking in it. And so, here we are, at the very end of the day's ledger. We have arrived in this present moment, a place of quiet and simple pleasure. We have gently looked back without judgment and gently looked forward without anxiety. The journey is complete, and this brings us to the very last, and perhaps the most important, calculation of the day. It is the final, conscious, and wise choice to let go. Now, that phrase, letting go, can sound very passive, as if it's something that just happens to you. But the way we're talking about it tonight is different. It is an active and deliberate decision. Think about what your mind has been doing, even for the last hour as you've been listening to these words. It has been engaged. It has been following along, thinking about these ideas of pleasure and pain and observation and tranquility. It has been doing a gentle, quiet, but very real kind of work. And now, that work is also done. The time for calculation, even the calm and wise calculus of Epicurus, is over. To truly enter the state of deep, restorative rest that you need, we must make a conscious choice to release our mind from its job. Its job, all day long, is to think. It plans, it solves, it remembers, it analyzes, it creates stories. It's what our mind does, and it does it relentlessly. But sleep requires a completely different state of being. Sleep requires surrender. It requires a profound state of trust. It requires us to gently, deliberately, take our hands off the controls and allow the ancient, non-thinking wisdom of our bodies to take over. This final step can feel surprisingly difficult. The thinking part of our mind, that inner narrator that has been talking all day, often has a deep-seated fear of becoming unemployed. It believes, on some level, that if it stops its constant managing and its constant commentary, then something will go wrong. It thinks it needs to solve one more problem, or review one more memory, or make one more plan, just to keep things safe. And so, it will often keep serving up just one more thought, just one more worry, just one more idea to analyze, in a desperate attempt to stay relevant, to stay on the clock. This is the final calculation. It is the wisdom to see this last-minute flurry of thinking for what it is, a bad pleasure. The fleeting, momentary pleasure is the false sense of control and importance that thinking seems to offer. But the hidden and much, much larger cost is the very thing we are seeking, the deep peace and the profound, healing rest of a good night's sleep. The math is clear. A few more moments of useless thinking are not worth the price of tranquility, the good pain. Then, in this final moment, is the tiny, almost imperceptible effort it takes to consciously turn away from your thoughts. It's the choice to not follow that interesting idea down its rabbit hole. It's the choice to not engage with that worry about tomorrow that just popped into your head. It is the simple, silent, and endlessly patient act of letting go of the storyline. So how do we do that? We don't do it by fighting our thoughts. That just creates more noise. We do it by giving our mind a new, much simpler, and much more boring job to do. A job so simple that it can't get very involved with it. And the best one we have, the one that is always available to us, is to simply pay attention to the physical sensation of your own breathing. You don't have to change your breath. You don't have to control it or force it to be deep or slow. Your only task is to feel it. Just feel the air as it enters your body, and feel it as it leaves your body. Maybe you feel it most at your nostrils, or maybe you feel it most as the gentle rise and fall of your chest or your stomach. It doesn't matter where you feel it. Just rest your attention there. This physical sensation is happening right now, in this present moment. It is real. A thought, on the other hand, is almost always a story about the past or the future. The feeling of your breath is the anchor that holds you in the calm reality of right now. When a thought inevitably arises, and it will, that is what minds do, there is no need to get frustrated. You haven't failed. You just apply the gentle observer's mind one last time. You can mentally whisper, thinking, acknowledging its presence without judgment. And then, as gently as you would guide a lost child by the hand, you guide your attention back to the simple, repetitive, calming sensation of your breath. Each time you do this, you are making the final, wisest calculation of the day. You are choosing the profound, long-term pleasure of deep rest over the fleeting, stressful habit of late-night thinking. You are telling your mind, in the kindest and most compassionate way, thank you for your hard work today. I appreciate everything you've done, but your shift is over now. You can rest. You are letting go of the need to figure anything else out tonight. The lessons have been learned. The intentions have been set. You have arrived in the quiet pleasure of the present moment. And now, the only thing left to do is to allow yourself to be carried into the stillness. There is nothing else to calculate. The ledger is clear. The only task remaining is to rest. And so, the ledger is closed. The judge who lives in your mind has long since gone home. The gentle observer has finished its work for the day. Its quiet notes have all been taken. The day, with all of its choices, all of its victories, and all of its valuable lessons, has been put to rest. There is nothing left to account for. The ideas we've explored tonight, the calm calculus, the gentle observer, the simple pleasure of just being here, they are not another set of rules you have to follow perfectly. They are not another test you have to pass, or another thing to feel you are not doing correctly. If they served any purpose at all, it was simply to be a soft and a quiet place for your mind to land. A safe harbor after a long day on a busy sea. And now that your mind has landed, The words themselves have served their purpose. They are like a boat that has carried you from a noisy shore to this quiet one. And now that you have arrived on this quiet shore, you can let the boat drift away. You don't have to hold on to it. You don't have to remember any of this. In fact, it is better if you don't. The only thing that matters now is the feeling of peace that is left behind. So let the memory of my voice and the memory of these words begin to fade. Let them become indistinct, like a conversation you are overhearing from a great distance. Let them dissolve into the background, becoming just another part of the quiet of the room. And let your awareness sink down, out of the world of thoughts and ideas, and into the simple, warm, and heavy reality of your body. Feel the weight of the blankets upon you, a gentle, reassuring pressure that signals safety and comfort. Feel the softness of the pillow beneath your head, holding you, supporting you completely. Notice that there is nothing you need to hold up. You can let go of all the tiny, hidden tensions in your body. You can let go of the tension in your jaw, in your shoulders, in your hands. Feel them becoming heavy and soft and warm. Feel your entire body sinking gently down into the mattress, being held, being cared for. There is nowhere else you need to be. There is nothing else you need to be doing. The day is done. The calculations have all been made. And the final answer is always the same: rest. The lessons have all been learned. And the only wisdom that matters now is the quiet wisdom of your body, which knows that it is time to be still and time to heal. There is nothing else to do now, nothing else to figure out. Just this quiet, just this breath, just rest. So just rest now. Just rest.